Okay, can you guys hear me now? All right, perfect. My headset is shut off. So thank you, everyone. I'm excited that if everybody has made it on our call today, we're going to have a little bit of fun talking about accessing historical Dynamics GP data right inside of D365 or Dynamics 365 Finance. A couple quick little things, I guess, as we get started here. We're gonna start by just a few terms. We're gonna make sure that everybody understands, what we're getting into, and maybe some terms that might be less familiar to you. We're gonna kind of talk about our overall migration strategy, and then really focus a lot of the time and a lot of the demo on viewing that historical data right inside of GP, or the historical GP data right inside of D365 Finance. Okay, so we talked about terms. We're going to talk about this a lot today because this is a really big focus of what we're on, and that is an Azure Data Lake. So if you are not familiar with this term, what is an Azure Data Lake? It is essentially what's called a storage account. So what that means is that as you put something in your or the customer's Azure account, right? It'll be a special little storage area where we can store all kinds of information. Now, this is one of the things that I think confuses a lot of people, is that the data, unlike in your Dynamics GP world that you're coming from, where it was all stored in a SQL table and had a very structured way of storing it. A data lake is something that is very unstructured. So what that means is we can have, a file that's a CSV sitting next to a file that's a PDF or an Excel file or an image file, like a JPEG. So you can store all kinds of information out there and it doesn't really care, whereas a database very much cares about the structure of how you put that in there. So another thing about an Azure Data Lake, as like I said, it will be in the customer's account out there, is that a data lake is a very cost-effective way of storing the data. So we've found that even people that have hundreds of gigabytes of data, or we've started hearing a few more people getting into the terabytes of data, it's still incredibly cost effective. Again, for most people that, if you have less than 100 gigabytes of data that you're accessing, tens of thousands of times a month, most people are looking at, $20 a month. If you were getting into, some maybe geo redundancy and some of those kinds of things where you have backups stored in other Azure data centers. And again, if you have terabytes of data, you might be getting into the hundreds of dollars a month. So what you'll see is that it's a very cost-effective way of storing this data, whether you need to keep it for, 10 years, 7 years, 3 years, whatever it may be, but it's a great way to store that information. And then Popdock is a great way of surfacing that information, which is what we're going to go into today. So the other part we're going to talk about, right, that's the first term. We're going to talk about Azure Data Lakes quite a bit today. The second term is, this is something new that we're introducing called the Popdock Data Lake Upload Tool. And so this is going to help us connect to the data, your existing GP data, and move that for you to an Azure Data Lake and prepare it so that it can be accessed right inside of Dynamics 365 Finance. So that's kind of what we're gonna spend a lot of our time on today. So there's a couple terms you're gonna hear a few times. Again, Popdock maybe isn't another one. If you are not familiar to Popdock, Popdock is gonna be the engine that makes all of this happen. So again, that's probably something I should have put in there as an additional term if you're not familiar with it. All right, just a quick little look at the migration strategy. Again, I think a great portion of you today that are on the call are probably coming from an on-premise system, really, right? That means that you've hosted that SQL Server. It's inside of your network. Now that could be done a number of different ways, right? It might be all with physical servers today. I know a number of people have, while they've maintained that on-prem type of topology, they have moved it to more of the cloud, right? A cloud way of serving that up. So maybe all of your servers are actually hosted in AWS or in Microsoft's environment in Azure. So those are certainly some environments that we're seeing people have. We've seen a few people that have actually lifted their entire SQL server and put it, in Azure, even Azure SQL. So we've seen that a few times. There's even a number of companies that have, I'll mention like PowerGP Online. They have some hosting services where they basically have something around the GP that allows it to serve it up. So whatever it is, we're trying to basically have a plan for you, whether it's 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road, or you're looking at it right now. We have the tools for you to basically access that GP data, move it to a place where we can now access it in the cloud, and so eventually allow you to turn off those other environments, whether they be, again, servers that are running on-prem or again, services that you're paying for either in the cloud or through some other third-party hosting provider. So we're right in the middle of it, helping you move that data and again, make it accessible for everybody in the new world that you're going to. So let's dig right into this. We talked about one of the key parts is that if you have gone to Dynamics 365, the finance, or again, I'll probably slip up and call it F&O, or whatever you're calling it today, but we are looking at how do you access that information without having to leave the new system. So that's kind of one of the key tenets of what we're talking about today. And so there's a few things that you're going to be able to do, right? There's some times where you may want to just pull just the historical type of data that's coming from GP, and you want to see it right inside of F&O. There's maybe a scenario where you want to see the history that came from your years of using Dynamics GP and combining that with the new information that's coming into the finance system. And so again, an example of that might be, right, if we have sales transactions, well, you may have 10 years of history for that customer, but we also want the new stuff. So if I can look in one place to find a list that combines the historical data with the new data coming from finance, then now that's a really powerful list that we don't have to go hunting all over the place to find that history. And again, one of the things that I think is important is that we can actually filter these lists down by customer, vendor, account, whatever it may be, whatever area, we can bring that in and just pull that information, as opposed to pulling again all of the data for all customers, for example. We can pull it just for that one particular scenario. Okay, I think we should jump right in and actually show you just a little bit of what we're looking at for a start. So let me switch over. Okay, and instead of starting inside of Popdock, I want to start right inside of finance. So if we look at this, and I'm going to go right to a scenario that we just talked about, is I actually want to see the history. And now this is, again, any of you that came from GP and have ever seen a demo, there's probably Aaron Fitz, the electrical company that was one of the demo companies. And so I have their record up inside of finance. But then if I scroll down to the bottom, what I want to show you is I have this new little section called GP history. And so when I click on this, I now have a live look. Well, in this case, it's not live into GP, it's a look into what we put into the Azure Data Lake. And so again, we were able to store that information, and we're able to see just the history that's in here for Aaron Fitz. Now, the beautiful part about this, we can still interact with it, even though it's been archived. We can still add additional columns, right? If we want to see like the account amount that's on there or some other columns inside of here, we can do that. And again, it's going to go grab that data for us. We can even do some really fun things where we can we can move some columns around, right? So this account amount, if this is the most important thing here, I can move that to the front. We can even do some really fun things, like if I wanted to see by item number, if I wanted to get a total. So what we're getting now is we're getting subtotals by item number. And so if we focus over here, like the extended, probably the extended price is probably the most important thing to this conversation. We can see that, you know, here this item has this this value and so on, and then we also get an overall total for that extended price. So there's some really nice things that we can interact with this data without ever leaving finance. We can still interact with that old historical information. We could export it to Excel. We can even filter on this, right? If you were only looking for a particular date range, and again, I probably don't have very good date ranges inside of here, but you have the full capability with an unlimited amount of filters. You just keep mashing on that button and we can filter this down. So your end users, again, without having to be overly technical, can get at just the data that they want. And you know, we could say, like, again, for like a specific date range, so like document date, for example, you could choose a between. I think that's how a lot of people have chosen to use this in the past. But we have done some really cool things inside of here. You don't even have to use the between statement. We have this comparison. So if you only wanted to see stuff for this month or maybe this quarter or this year, right, or last year, whatever data you wanted to see, you can put that in there as a filter, and now we have really the control that we need to get down to just the data that's needed. So the power really goes back to the end user without having to go back to IT every time. They have some control over what they want to see. Again, if they want to get rid of some columns, if they want to add some columns, they can do all of that. And again, it's right inside of F&O, and it looks and feels native to the F&O as opposed to feeling like an entirely you know, foreign application that's bringing that data in. Now, since we're in here, right, we're focusing on the GP history, but just to show you one thing above, this is actually kind of interesting because this is an entirely different piece of data. This is pulling some Shopify orders. And so now we can see, there we go, there's some Shopify orders that are in there. So we can embed, it doesn't just have to be historical GP data, we can embed all kinds of things right inside of the F&O system. Okay, so there's a good start, just showing you what we can do. Now, let's get into really the next part is, how does this actually happen? So the tool we're going to get into now is the Popdock Data Lake upload tool. And we're going to cover a couple different sections. One, first of all, how do we connect to the GP data in your existing system? And how do we do that, you know, securely and move over all of the information that we need? The second part is going to be on how we actually go about moving that data. So a couple of key points. With this Popdock Data Lake upload tool, a key tenet of this is that it doesn't require opening up, you know, any ports to your SQL server or, again, any holes in your firewall to get to the outside world. Even in the recent history, we've done some ways of getting at your GP data if it's on premise. So we've introduced a gateway to help, you know, make that securely. You don't have to use that gateway with this solution, which is really, really powerful, I think, for a lot of people, just making sure that you're keeping everything secure. Another key point is that you have the capability of moving all of your GP lists. And so what does that mean? It's all of the standard smart lists. It's all of the ones that you built with SmartList Builder. It's all of the lists that, again, even if you used baby SmartList Builder, right? SmartList Designer, you can use that, any of those lists, and we can move those to the data lake so that you can access that. So I think one of the big things there is, right, it's the familiarity. It's, if you have GP users, this is going to give them that same interface that they're already used to, right? It's the same data that they're already used to. They're using those smart lists inside of there. And so this is a great way to do that. Another thing is that we have basically the whole database backup. And this is important because, right, just in case, I call this the insurance policy. Just in case you ever needed to go back, right? If you turn off that GP SQL Server, I need to make sure that I could go back and I could pull anything inside of the system and make sure I could access it. So that is a key part of what we're talking about here as well, and we'll demonstrate in just a second. So the second part before we get into the demo is after we connect to it, how do we move it? So this is where we're going to be moving your smart lists and your favorites to an Azure Data Lake and making those, I guess the most important part is making it accessible so that we can access that data. So a couple of key pieces here, right, is that this runs in your environment, right? It doesn't run outside of the cloud. So again, we kind of talked about it a little bit before, but there's no additional server that needs to be set up. There's no gateway. There's no, holes in a firewall to set up. We're able to move the data as fast as two areas, right? As fast as it can be extracted from your SQL server. So that can be an issue, right? If you are having a lot of data. And so this is the question. Everyone wants to know what a lot of data means. It means very different things to certain people. Some people don't maybe have necessarily a huge transaction volume, but they've been using GP for 20 years. And so they may have hundreds of gigabytes of data that need to move. Other people are, maybe only using it for 5 years, but have an enormously large transaction volume. Maybe they're doing, 50,000 sales transactions a day with, 100 lines on each one. So whatever it may be, we can handle those kinds of environments. I'll just say this, right? If you're moving a terabyte of data, it is going to take longer to both extract it out of your SQL Server, and it's going to take longer to actually upload that much data to a data lake. So that's where I don't have a hard and fast rule for how long that time is going to take, but it is important to I guess just to estimate that, again, if you have 10 gigabytes of data or you have a terabyte of data, it is going to take much longer. So again, for 10 gigabytes of data, we're probably talking, depending on how fast your upload is, we're probably talking a number of hours at the most, whereas terabytes of data, you might be talking about a couple days. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. The other part that this tool is going to allow for is it's going to allow us to fix errors as they occur. So that's a big part of how this looks. So I want to get right into showing you what this new tool can do for you. If we go inside of here now, and I'm going to open up the tool and just kind of walk through the pieces to this. So we talked about how do we connect. So as this fires up, it's going to ask what you want to move. So we're talking about Dynamics GP. The first part is we're going to do the smart lists. The second part is around tables. So when I do this, the first thing you do is you're going to log into your Popdock account. If you have more than one account, you'll pick that account. Again, many partners I think are on this call. You obviously will probably be doing this for more than one customer, and so you may have access to an additional account. You'll log into the account. What it does next is it actually will pull all the information on a data lake connector that you've set up already. And so as it's logging me into this one, it should be coming up in a second. Okay, there we go. And it's pulling a list of all of my Azure data lakes that I have set up inside of here. We do need to put in a couple of credentials again on here because we are going to be doing a push instead of a pull. So we are pushing from your network to the server. Maybe one other key point to bring out, this does not have to be run on a server. It can be run on a workstation. Again, for some of these, if it's going to go over multiple days, you might need to make sure that it is something that doesn't get turned off or anything like that. But this is something that, again, does not have to necessarily be on a dedicated server to run this tool. Okay, we're hooking into our data lake connector, so I'll hit connect. The last part here is it's asking which version of Dynamics GP you're going to be utilizing. So in my case, I have this original 2018 version, and that's what I'm going to be moving to. You'll put in all the credentials into your Dynamics database. I want to point out one thing here. I know a lot of people do get caught up sometimes in, you always put SA in your examples, and we do it probably because we're lazy in our demos, but it does not have to be an SA user that's used here. It just has to be a user that has read capabilities on all of the databases and tables in whatever your Dynamics database is called in each of your companies. The other part is that we do have to have the capabilities of reading the sys objects inside of the SQL Server, because we're pulling all the metadata about the tables so that we can create that the proper way when we push it or move it to the Azure Data Lake. Okay, so just wanted to point that out because a lot of people do get hung up on that. It does not need to be SA. It just needs to be a user has read access to the databases, and then again, the capability of calling sys objects so we can get the metadata. All right, once we connect to this, it's going to pull back all of the companies. This is another key part here, because with these companies, you can choose which ones you want. And this is a key thing. I know many of you have, you may have companies that you haven't used in a number of years. Maybe it was a test company. Maybe it was a company that you've combined with one of the other companies, or again, maybe it was a part of the organization that is no longer functioning. Whatever the reason is, you do not have to move that data if you don't want to. And so you will be able to choose which companies you want to move. And in my case, I'm going to skip this threes company. I don't really have any data in there, and so I'm going to choose to not move it. Next, it's going to say which list do you want to copy. So like I said, it has all the standard smart lists, but it also has, as you can see, I got a few interesting ones in here, Joe Test, and I saw some EQA ones. These are all smart lists that were built with Smart List Builder. So all of those will move as well. Again, if you only plan on using maybe some AR history, some payables history, maybe some account transaction history, right? The GL at the GL level, whatever it is, you will be able to choose which ones you want to move. And then the next part here is it's going to start the process. So what I want to show you as it's cranking through here is it's going to tell you, again, because we chose two companies and it looks like we must have right around 150 lists that are going in there. It's going to tell us how many we have. It's going to give us an update of where we're at for how much has been completed, how much is pending. So if we look at this account transactions, I think in my particular case has 300,000 transactions in there. So you can see it's almost done extracting everything out into the file that we're going to have. And then the next step is going to, there we go. Now it's actually doing the upload. So like I said, if you do have a bad connection to the internet, right? If you don't have a good upload speed, this process will take longer. There's just nothing we can do, because it is, I guess that's just the nature of it, right? It is going to be dependent upon that. But this is the big list. This one has most of my transactions in. So once this one's done, it'll start flying through these other particular areas that we're in. Okay, while we're waiting for this, because I do want to show you a couple things when we come back around, I want to show you one key component that's actually inside of Popdock. So once you have uploaded this information, for example, the key part is, for a lot of people, is being able to combine the new information with the old information. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go into one of my F&O connectors. Let's pull this first one here. If I go into this connector, you can see looks like I have a few lists that are in here. And just to let you know, right, when I hit this button, I can choose to add any list that's available right inside from F&O. But for now, I'm just going to use what I have up there. And what I want to show you is that I can do a custom list that does a number of things. I can join it just like I would a SQL table. Now, this is kind of interesting because you don't really get access to the SQL tables inside of finance. You only get access to web services, right? Microsoft controls that, so we don't have access to the SQL server to do this, but we have the capability with Popdock to join something that relies on web services to, well, it could be a SQL table. It could also be a CSV file that's sitting in an Azure Data Lake, right? So we have ways of joining that together, just like you would, if you will, a kind of a virtual SQL environment. In this case, we're going to do something interesting. Again, if you came from the SQL world, this is really a merge list is a way for us to combine data between, again, in the past, you would call it a union, right, in the SQL world. But we can do that union or a merge between different connectors. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, is that if we were to do a new one, we could do it like, I'll call it all SOP lines, all sales lines, how about? And what I'm able to do in this case, we'll put it in sales, but I can say, hey, you know what? I want one list that is coming from this F&O connector. So I want the sales order lines, right? So I'm going to pick that list. And again, I can choose which companies I want it for. So we'll go ahead and choose all of them. And then I can say I also want to join, not from finance and operations, but I actually want to join from this Azure Data Lake list. And so if I wanted to take from here, if I wanted to take the sales line items, there we go, sales line items. And if I wanted to combine, again, I have very different companies here, but yes. So now what I have is I have these two very different lists, and then I can start saying, hey, in this one, in the history, the GP history that's in the data lake, it was called SOP number. Here, I'll just do one of these. I won't go through everything here, but I'll just call this doc number just for our instances. So this will be a string field. So what it's basically saying, in the sales line items that's coming from Dynamics GP or the data lake in this case, what do you want? So I want the document number. Oh, let's see. It's called SOP number in here. Okay, I want the SOP number. And then in here, it's called sales order, I think. So basically it allows us, right, we're taking a field called sales order, a field called SOP number, and we're actually going to call it doc number in our list. And so you would do this for, again, if you had 5 different fields that you wanted to see inside of here, we were able to map those. And at the end of this, you now have a brand new list that we can display anywhere inside of there that has a combination of both the history and the brand new system. So I just wanted to show you that briefly because it's a very powerful part of Popdock. If we go back here, looks like, oh, we hit it just perfectly. It was just finishing up as we were done. So again, we moved, I don't know, a gigabyte of data there in just 5-10 minutes. So that was pretty quick. The other piece in here, I think that's important, is not everything succeeded. And so we can actually see that a couple of these things failed. So I can see that this employee list failed. I can also see that was for the Fabricam company. So that's the only list that failed for Fabricam. But I had a few things fail for here. Now, most of these actually came from a lack of, I didn't have an extender set up inside of that company. And so that's why the smart list failed, because there actually wasn't the extender window to pull data from. So these are some legitimate errors, but it's a great thing that we can access it right from inside of here. And then you'll be able to actually click on it in the version I have here. I'm not able to do it, but you'll be able to click on it and actually do something about it if you want to resubmit it again, if there was, again, some other kind of error that could be fixed, or maybe you're able to fix it, that we can resubmit that. You can also see the logs right inside of here, but I want to show you one more thing, is that we can turn around and we can run this again, But this time, instead of doing the smart lists, we can do tables. So I won't go through the whole thing here. Let me just quickly go through the first part just to show you that what control you have here and what's different about it. All right, it's taking a little bit of time logging in. Okay, maybe just one other thing too, as we're getting close to the end, I want to make sure that we get everybody's questions answered. So I would encourage you, if you do have some questions, to please put them in the questions pane, and we'll get through as many as we can as soon as we're done here. Okay, let me do this one last thing here. So I got to put my Data Lake connector in there again. Uh-oh. Okay, I may have messed up something here. What it should have given me, I might have to log in again. What it should have given me is really the capability of only seeing the databases now. So instead of seeing the lists, now it basically says, hey, what entire database do you want to move? And so this is what I call the insurance policy, saying, hey, we're going to move the entire database, all 2,500 tables that are in there. The same kind of thing though is if there is no data in those tables, we are not going to move that data. And I think that's a key part, right? If you have a company where you're only using payables, you're not using all 2,500 tables in GP. So why move 2,000 blank tables to the data lake? So we have some intelligence built in there to make that an option. Again, I apologize. I do not know why my companies didn't show up here. So let's just move and let's get to the questions that are out there. Okay, sorry. Maybe before I get to the questions, just a couple key points to wrap everything up. This tool allows you to securely and easily connect to your Dynamics GP data, right? We do not need to poke holes in a firewall to make this happen. We don't have to install a gateway. This is a really easy way of hooking into your GP data. And then the second point is that we can quickly and easily move that to an Azure Data Lake. And really the important part is it's one thing to move it, but we give you the tools, right? You don't have to then bring a developer in or a BI expert to then access it. We give you that access to report off of it, and then more importantly, see it right inside of finance, so that you don't have to go hunting all over the place. You have your data in one place. So that's kind of probably the last point I wanted to bring home, and then now we'll get to the questions. So let me bring this up. Okay, I got a couple in here. First question was, what versions are supported? Okay, that's a really good question. Without maybe a couple ways of answering this, without writing any code, there's after 10.21 in the online version, you have that capability of embedding right inside of the solution without having to write any code at all. Prior to that, you would actually have had to, it would be a development exercise to allow us to embed that into the system. So that's one thing, I guess, for the online version of finance. It has to be greater than 10.21. Okay, there's another one asking, oh, does it work with AX on-prem? Yeah, again, we don't, this is primarily focused on really the cloud-based version of this. So it would be kind of another thing. It would be a development exercise if you wanted to embed that inside of AX on-prem. But again, that would be development and writing some code to make that happen. And we don't have any plans to really to do a lot more with on the on-premise side of AX. It's really all the cloud-based version of finance. Okay, looks like I got another one here. How far back for GP versions can we go? I did briefly show you a drop-down list of how many, how basically you pick your GP version. Right now, so far, we have gone back to a version 9 of GP. So that's, I mean, that's literally 17, probably 17 years ago now, almost, when that came out. So that's a pretty long time ago, but I know there'll be somebody that'll be on an older version of that. And we're dedicated to, again, if you find somebody that's on 8 or 7 or something like that, we'll work with you on finding out the differences, and make sure that that's an option as well. But we're dedicated to helping you move that information, even if you are on an older version. If you're on something that is not SQL based, so if you're starting to get back into the 4.0 world and on Btrieve, then that's probably a different story. But if it's SQL based, we'll be able to get at that version for GP. All right, I don't see any other questions in the queue there. So I'll wrap it up. I'll thank you for your time today. Appreciate you investing in here. And if you do have some additional questions, please message our sales at eonesolutions.com and we'll get you to the right place. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.